Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links video. Today we're going to go over some of the new leaks, and the actual Rush leaks we got weren't very plentiful. In fact, it was just a single skill. But from that skill we are able to infer and predict quite a lot. So what was the skill? It's a Cyber Dragon skill, and basically says this skill can only be used if all monsters in your deck are machine type and there are no level 7 monsters in your deck. Now this clearly is trying to dissuade or prevent players from being able to use Mirror Innovator in their Cyber Dragon deck, which is quite interesting. That might mean that Cyber Dragon itself is not limit 3, which would be very interesting. I don't think Cyber Dragon itself would necessarily have to be limit 3, but a lot of the cards around Cyber Dragon probably would be best if they weren't able to be played alongside Mirror Innovator. Things like Cyber Twin Dragon, probably best to not let one of the strongest decks in the game that has really easy access to piercing and a massive power boost also get access to a 2800 attack monster that can attack twice. So the easier thing to do would just be to slap a limit 3 on the Cyber Dragon itself, but obviously we have this skill telling us we're just not allowed to use the Mirror Innovator, maybe can't use it as a 1-off for example. But requirement can be activated on turn 2 onwards. One face-up monster on your field with 2100 or 2400 attack. So 2100 is obviously going to be Cyber Dragon. A lot of the Cyber Dragon boss monsters, which are Rush exclusive, do have that 2400 attack stat, so it's obviously referring to them, and they are level 8 and not level 7, which again is very important. But they'll gain 500 attack. So Cyber Dragon will go up to 26, so it can attack over 25s, that's fine. 2900 attack on the boss monsters is a little bit low, just because we assume fusions are going to be coming out sooner rather than later, and 29 won't clear all of them. So there might be a little bit of a detriment going on there, but anyway, this buff lasts until the end of the turn. Then you can return one card from your hand to your deck to add Proto Cyber Dragon from your deck or graveyard to your hand once per duel. So once per duel, we don't actually plus, we have to give up a card from our hand, but then we can go and grab the Proto Cyber Dragon. Now this is okay. This means we can get a brick out of our hand, for example, if we have too many like level 8 monsters. It does mean that we can find the Proto Cyber Dragon, which can be useful because all of our boss monsters for this archetype do say that if we tribute a Cyber Dragon to summon it, you can summon it out for 1 less tribute. So Proto Cyber Dragon is pretty good in that regard as well. But when we also get fusions, obviously having access to a card that is treated as Cyber Dragon is going to be really, really strong. And that kind of brings us to the next elephant in the room. Because this is a singular skill, it is implied, and so far I think a lot of people have predicted this is going to be a structure deck. So the question then becomes, will this structure deck come out before or with the release of fusions? My personal thought is that it will come out before fusions, and then later on during fusion's lifespan we can then release those Cyber Twin, Cyber End Dragons, give them the big boss monster support, because the Cyber Dragon deck doesn't actually need fusions to work, especially not with the current state the meta is in. I think the deck would be fine without fusions. Do I think the deck would be good without the fusions? That's hard to say. I'm leaning towards probably not. The deck is notoriously not going to have a great way to deal with set 3 pass without Innovator and without that Cyber Twin Dragon, so maybe that could be a bit awkward. But I think there is a world in which this structure deck does get released pre-fusion, and we do get some pre-fusion Cyber Dragons for a little bit. So let's talk about some of the cards. The first one is Cyber Dragon. Now everyone should know this card, the Zane Special. Cyber Dragon is one of the most impactful cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Not only was this card a fantastic anime card, everyone loved Zane in GX, and it's just become an archetype that is still seeing support to this day and still sees a ton of people jamming this on Master Duel, again, to this day. On top of the fact, this card ended the GOAT format. Basically, GOAT format ended at Cybernetic Revolution because that is when Cyber Dragon came out, and it really did change the landscape of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. It's just so impactful in so many different ways, so of course it had to come to Rush. Now, as a Rush monster, this card is fine. It's not actually that busted. As a 1 tribute monster, only having 2100 attack is pretty standard. Now, being able to get it out a little bit cheaper is fine, but realistically you're only going to do that once per turn anyway, because once you've already got a Cyber Dragon out, you're not really going to be able to cheat out another one most of the time. 1600 defense again is pretty good. The only other monster with 2100 attack and more defense than this is Flame Cerberus, so it's pretty on par with that. So Cyber Dragon is, again, it's fine, it's okay. The card itself, I don't know if this card would see play as a standalone include in the Light Machine deck with Ultimate Bond. I realistically don't think the card is necessarily that super good, but as a combo piece within the Cyber Dragon deck itself, it is obviously invaluable. Just having the name Cyber Dragon does allow this to work with a bunch of other cards that we will be talking about. Next up, the other card we guarantee we're getting is going to be Proto Cyber Dragon. Now, everyone should already know what this card does as well. 1100 attack, 600 defense. Continuous effect, this card's name becomes Cyber Dragon. So obviously we can search this from our deck once per duel, which is neat. Again, we contribute this to get out our boss monsters, and we can also use this for fusions. Again, assuming we get these fusions with this structure deck. Now we'll get into some Rush exclusives. This is Cyber Cotal, a level 3, 500 attack, 1200 defense monster. If we have no other monsters on our field, we can excavate the top 3 cards of our deck. We can then special summon one excavated level 5 machine type monster face up to our field, and place the remaining cards at the bottom of our deck in any order. Now notably, we could use this to summon out Cyber Dragon, we could also use this to summon out Cyber Tech Alligator, and even our Ultimate Flag Beast Rhino if we are playing that. And again, if we do get this pre-fusion, we will need some way to beat set 3 pass, and the Rhino might actually see some play because we need piercing in some degree, right? So Cyber Cotal I think would make sense to come out. It only works with level 5 machines, so this wouldn't actually be a buff to the current machine Ultimate Bond deck. Next up, talking about Ultimate Flag Beasts, here's another one. This is Lead Unicorn. So 1100 attack is fine, it's not that high. If you have 3 or more light attribute machine type monsters in your graveyard, we can change one face up level 4 or lower monster on our opponent's field to face down defense position. So it's sort of like a Siesta Torero type effect. Then we can special summon one level 5 machine monster from our hand face up to our field. And again, here we're back on theme with the level 5 support. And again, I think this card would be relatively likely to come out because I think this level 5 support theme does make sense for Cyber Dragon, as well as it doesn't give any strength to the Ultimate Bond deck. So I think there's a good chance we get this card in the deck. Next up, we have Cyber Assault Dragon, and this is the first of the Cyber Dragon boss monsters. This is level 8, which means again we can use it even with the skill. 2400 attack is a decent attack stat. Obviously, it's not that 25 we'd like to see, but 24 is the next best thing, right? 1800 defense is also quite nice. It means we're not going to just fall over to shield and sword. You contribute this card in attack position by tributing one face-up Cyber Dragon. Now, notably, this will work with Proto and the regular Cyber Dragon. We can place a Cyber Dragon from our graveyard on the top of the deck. And again, this has to be an actual Cyber Dragon because Proto Cyber Dragon's effect is only active while it is in play. Then we can destroy one face-up level 8 or lower monster with 2400 or more attack on your opponent's field. So this is very, very specific, right? We can only pop 2400 or more attack and level 8 and lower. So we can't pop most fusions. We can't pop maximum monsters. We also can't pop weaker boss monsters. So we can't pop Receptacle Mani, we can't pop Seven's Road Magician, nothing like that. But we can pop Ragius, we can pop any of the other 2500s, we can pop Mirror Innovators. There is still quite a lot we can hit with this card. Overall, this card is fine. But I think, again, this is going to put emphasis on the fact that we're not going to necessarily be too strong into actual fusion monsters, because a lot of those are going to be level 9, and a lot of those are going to have, let's say, 3000 attack, which does mean Cyber Assault Dragon might struggle to get over it, even with the skill giving it a power boost. And the other boss monster I think could come out, but I think is a little bit less likely, is Cyber Search Dragon. So 2400 attacks, only 1600 defense, so it has lost 200 defense, but we contribute summon this card in attack position by tributing a face-up Cyber Dragon, so same effect as before. Requirement, during the main phase, this card was normal or special summoned, we can place one card from our hand on top of our deck, so -1, and then special summon a Cyber Dragon from our graveyard. So again, it does replace that one, so we kind of break even, but we can use this to basically get an extra body, and that's actually really, really strong, right? We could just special summon a Cyber Dragon from hand, immediately tribute it to summon out the Cyber Search Dragon, and then bring back that 2100 attack Cyber Dragon, and we have a 24 and a 21, only using 2 cards from our hand, and then we can boost one of them by 500 attack. That does seem really, really good. So that could potentially see some play, but again, Cyber Search is not guaranteed to come out. I think if we're only going to get one boss, we're more likely to get Assault, but if we do get Search, we could have some really interesting plays to make. Next up, we'll talk about a spell card, Cyber Entry. So if we have 3 or more light attribute machine type monsters in the graveyard, we can special summon a Cyber Dragon or Proto Cyber Dragon from our hand or graveyard face up to the field. So always going to want to get a monster from graveyard ideally, but we can summon from hand if we are a little bit bricked up. This turn, you can only attack with light attribute machine type monsters, so this lock can be impactful. This does mean when Jinzo eventually does come out, you won't really want to be using that and this card in the same turn, because because even though you can turn off all your opponent's back row, you won't be able to attack with that Jinzo. So there is some noticeable things that will lock you out. Craft the Drone is another one, which is an Earth Machine monster. I think this card would be fine to come out, because it does support Cyber Dragon and Proto, but it doesn't do anything inherently unfair. It has a lot of restrictions on it, and when you do summon that monster, it's basically just going to be a +1. We can use this to help us go into our stronger boss monsters and eventually go into those big fusion plays. I think immediately this card would be fine as just like a one-of, even if this card was limited, which I don't even necessarily think it would need to be. I think actually we would struggle to find room to put this card in the deck just because spell trap space can be very, very tight. Now, so far we've been going under the assumption that we will get these pre-fusion, but I think if we do get these with the release of fusion monsters and the fusion mechanic, I think the most suitable monster to come out as their fusion boss monster would be Cyber Rush Dragon. This is another Rush exclusive boss monster and is made using 2 Cyber Dragons. So in the physical version of the game, we basically have to decide whether we want to make this or Cyber Twin Dragon. And I would almost always choose Cyber Twin Dragon because Cyber Twin Dragon is amazing, but this guy is still fine. So 2800 attack, 2100 defense, not the best stats, let's be honest. If your opponent has a monster on their field, we can draw cards until we're holding 5 cards. Now, that's okay, right? So if we have 0 cards, we draw 5, which does give us 5 chances at finding a boss. Now, why do we say that? Because then we send 4 cards from our hand to the graveyard. So we're only actually keeping 1 of those cards. Then we can special summon 1 machine type monster from our hand face up to our field. So we don't have to summon that machine. So we could go digging, for example, for a legend trap, and then just set that, and then pass the turn and be fine. Or we can dig for a boss monster and try and slam that down onto the field. Now the best target for this historically was Mirror Innovator. If we can't play Mirror Innovator with this card, then it will have to be one of our other Cyber Dragon boss monsters like Assault or Search. So this card is fine, it's nothing like super crazy, but being able to make this very easily by using 2 Cyber Dragons, so for example if we have 2 Proto Cyber Dragons, just 3 cards to go into this, and then we get to go into another boss monster as well, can be pretty cool. It's nothing like super broken, but it's fine, and I think that's why it would make sense that this would be the first fusion monster to release. Now we're going to talk about some cards that I think are a lot less likely to come out, but there is still a chance, especially if these do come out with the fusion and the fusion mechanic. So, the first card we're going to talk about is Cyber Serpent. Now, we'll talk about what this card is, but then we'll talk about why we don't think this card's going to release. So this is 0 attack, 0 defense, level 1 light machine. If we have another face-up light attribute machine type monster on our field, we can send the top 3 cards of our deck to the graveyard. Then if we sent 2 or more light attribute machine type monsters to the graveyard, we can draw a card. So, on paper this seems like gambling to potentially get a draw. It's very similar, I guess, in a lot of ways to Rhythmical Performer. But this card would basically be really good support for the Mirror Innovator Ultimate Bond deck. Being able to fill our graveyard to fuel our Bicorn and our Mirror Innovator, as well as being able to plus, is very, very strong. Currently, the biggest weakness of the Mirror Innovator Light Machine Ultimate Bond deck is that it is very resource heavy. They don't tend to be able to end with a lot of cards on their field. Cyber Serpent giving them an extra avenue to just plus is something we really don't want to see if we're hoping that deck kind of falls a little bit into obscurity, because that deck has been so strong for so long. So I think Cyber Serpent is not likely to come out because it would give that deck a bit of an extra boost as well, and I think we would be focusing on only buffing Cyber Dragon and not Mirror Innovator. Next up we have Cyber Griffin, and this is another card that I don't think will come out because again, it would be too good with Innovator. But we can send 1 card from our hand to the graveyard, choose 1 face-up level 5 or higher machine type monster, so it does work with Innovator. This turn, that monster cannot be destroyed by your opponent's trap card effects, so it becomes immune to Widespread Ruin. Then, if that monster is light attribute, we can also draw a card. So it's Craft the Drone, as well as giving it trap protection, and it's also a good body because it's 1200 and 1300 defense. So I just think this card would be fantastic with Cyber Dragons, but will not come out because it would be too good with Innovator. So I think Cyber Griffin is going to be one that Konami will choose to avoid releasing with the deck. Next up we have Cyber Processor. So this is a fantastic support card for Cyber Dragons. This card didn't actually release with the first wave of Cyber Dragon support. This came out a little bit later to give the deck a bit more consistency, and you'll understand how it did that. So if we have a face-up machine type monster on the field, we can special summon this card from our hand face up to our field. So already we bypass the fact this guy's level 5, we're not having to tribute. Then we can send 1 other card from our field to the graveyard. Then this card's name becomes Cyber Dragon this turn, and then we can special summon a Cyber Dragon from our graveyard face up to our field. So the big combo you usually see with this is like summon out a Cyber Dragon, special processor, Process effect sends Cyber Dragon to graveyard, bring back the Cyber Dragon we just sent to graveyard. Now we have 2 Cyber Dragons, use, off you go. But we could also just get rid of a back row we're not using, for example, or an extra monster that we don't need, and then bring back a Cyber Dragon from the graveyard, and then bam, once again we have 2 Cyber Dragons. So it's very versatile, and again, it is level 5, so it does work with all the other level 5 support cards that we've spoken about up till now. The Cyber Processor would be absolutely incredible for the deck, but if this came out and fusions came alongside it, I think Cyber Dragon might actually become like a tier 1/tier 0 deck, because being able to easily turbo out 1 or even multiple Cyber Twin Dragons in a single turn seems really, really strong at this stage. So I don't think this card would come out, but when it does, Cyber Dragon will definitely be an extremely strong deck. Next up, we have Evolution Rush Burst. Now, I've seen some people say they think this card will come out at 1, in the same way that we've just seen Burst Stream of Destruction, and we've just seen Thousand Knives come out at 1. So that is always possible, but this card is really, really strong. So we have a face-up level 5 or higher machine-type monster on your field. So again, that also means Mirror Innovator. We can shuffle 5 light attribute machine-type monsters from your graveyard into the deck, and then destroy 1 card on the opponent's field. Now, this doesn't say, it doesn't work on maximums, this doesn't say face-up, this doesn't say monster, this is any card. So we can pop anything we want, and again, Ultimate Bond Mirror Innovator decks can just use it. That's why I don't think this card's going to come out, because I think it would just be too good and give too much of a buff to Ultimate Bond, but there is a slim chance this comes out at 1. I'm just not personally convinced. Now for one of the Cyber Dragon trap cards. So this isn't inherently a Cyber Dragon card, but this is generic machine support and is generally found in the early Cyber Dragon list. So Battle Demotion. When an opponent's monster declares an attack on your face-up machine type monster, we can pay 600 life points. Then we can change 1 attack position monster in the opponent's field to face-up defense position. So this doesn't have to be the monster that declared the attack, it could be any of your opponent's attack position monsters, and change them to defense can obviously be very, very strong, letting us stop an attack and potentially attack over it. Now, I don't think Battle Demotion is going to come out for a few different reasons. First off, it's generic machine support, so Mirror Innovate will be able to make good use of it. The second reason is Konami really doesn't like trap cards. They seem to be avoiding printing as many trap cards as possible, so I don't see them giving us the fast track with Battle Demotion. And the third is that this is actually a support card for another machine archetype, that being the Worker Warriors. So their boss monster here is Worker Warrior Sinister CEO, and it does have an effect which lets you set a Salary Slash and Battle Demotion from your graveyard to our spell and trap zone, as well as a fusion monster that does something similar. So realistically, I don't think Battle Demotion would come out until we got the Worker Warrior archetype out. We do already have one of their cards, but it's just a vanilla, so I don't think that's really indicative of anything. Battle Demotion again is a card that could come out, I just don't think it will. And next up we have another trap card, Multiple Adapter Unit. So when your opponent normal summons a monster, we can send 1 face-up level 5 or higher machine monster from our field to the graveyard. Now again, this is generic, anything that's level 5 or higher and a machine, this will work with. Change that normal summon monster to face down defense position. So this is already very, very strong, because this gives us a way to react to summons. The only other card we really have that can do this to boss monsters at the moment is going to be Forever Freeze. So this will give us another way to interact with summons, but then we can special summon a Cyber Assault Dragon or Cyber Stealth Dragon from our graveyard. So again, we don't really have any of the trap cards that special summon monsters that we should already have. For example, we don't have our Mirror Ball to bring back Dian Keto, and we do not have our Cuckoo Clock to bring back Night Vision. Now, you probably noticed here Cyber Assault Dragon and Cyber Stealth, and Cyber Stealth is another card I don't think we're going to see, and that is just because this card's defense value can get a bit insane. So it has the same stipulation where we contribute summon this card in attack position by tributing 1 face-up Cyber Dragon. It has 2500 attack as well, which obviously is a much better attack stat. 25 is a lot better than 24, but that does mean again it won't work with our skill, which I think is another hint it won't be coming out. Then as the continuous effect, if we have a Cyber Dragon in our graveyard, this card gains 2000 defense and cannot be destroyed by monster effects. So this thing is a 2800 defense monster that can't be popped by monster effects, which in my opinion is just too good to come out right now. We've already seen Konami try to avoid bringing out high defense monsters. We do have a couple of 2500 defense monsters, but nothing over that, even though there are others that definitely could have come out by now. But I think Konami, with trying to avoid the higher defense monsters and trying to avoid trap cards, trying to get out of this kind of stally type of meta, and I think Cyber Stealth Dragon fits into one of those cards that they would like to avoid. And now we'll talk about some fusions. Cyber Twin, everyone should know about this card. It is absolutely insane and it's pretty iconic. 2800 attack, can attack twice per turn. The only weakness of this card really is that it is level 8 and not level 9. Other than that, this card is insane. We already know how strong double attacking is in Rush. Any way to get to your opponent's life points are obviously going to be very, very powerful, and especially considering it's clear that Konami don't want us using Mirror Innovator with Cyber Dragon, Cyber Twin Dragon's value is only going to go up and up and up, because any way to have piercing or multi-attack is always going to be absolutely fantastic. And speaking of that piercing, Cyber End Dragon is another one. Now the only reason Cyber End Dragon isn't seen as much play is because 1, double attack is really strong, and 2, getting 3 Cyber Dragon is generally a lot harder than getting 2. But having a 4000 attack monster that can deal piercing damage is absolutely insane, especially if we can double its attack. But we'll talk about that in a minute. The next card we're going to talk about is Cyber Tactical Dragon. This is the most recent Cyber Dragon fusion that we've gotten in the Rush format. This is made using Cyber Assault Dragon and Cyber Dragon. We can shuffle 2 light attribute machine type monsters from our graveyard into the deck, then destroy up to 2 face-up monsters on your opponent's field, whose total attack is less than or equal to this card's. So it starts off with only 3200, which means we could pop, I don't know, 2 16s. Or we could basically just pop 1 boss monster on our opponent's field, right? Which is fine. It does only work on face-up monsters, but it is a 3200 attack that's level 9, which is pretty decent. But the way you're supposed to use this card is you're supposed to double its attack, and then pop 2 of our opponent's boss monsters. And how do we double it? Well, with Power Bond. Again, I don't think Power Bond is going to come out straight away. Power Bond does feel absolutely insane, especially with only 6k life points. If we're able to make, let's say, an 8000 attack Cyber End Dragon, all we need to do is attack over any monster that has 2000 or less defense, and we just win the game. So I don't really think we're going to see Power Bond anytime soon, but it is an iconic Cyber Dragon card, an iconic Zane card, and I wouldn't be surprised if this made its way to the game eventually. Just with the 6000 life points, it seems so likely that you're going to be able to OTK your opponent with Cyber Dragons, so I don't really think we're going to get them at full power, and I think that definitely means no Power Bond, especially at release. But that is going to be it for my predictions and speculation based on just this one little skill. Realistically, I would like to see Cyber Dragon come out pre-fusion, just let us play with it for a little bit, see what we can make happen with it, and then give it fusion support a little bit later. I think that would be the healthiest for the game as well, but at the same time, I could see it being part of the fusion campaign to try and get people really hyped for it. They're like, here's Cyber Dragon, everyone likes Cyber Dragon, there you go play with your new Cyber Dragon toys in a similar way that they gave us the Harpies with the release of Maximum. But thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.